My Bigfoot sighting happened when I was about 16 years old. It all started when I moved into the farm country about 10 miles out of town from where I grew up in northern Michigan, Lower Peninsula. We moved next to a river, and I went down to the river one day to check it out. My brothers were with me, and we were kind of just walking up and down the river, kicking rocks, throwing sticks, just being kids. We noticed a bunch of fish in the water, so we ran back and got our fishing poles, and we started fishing. And then got to the point where I would go down to the river all the time and fish. And one year, my uncle got me a pair of waders for Christmas because he knew how much I loved to fish. So went down to the river with my waders, and I was, reeling in these steelhead and brown trout, brook trout. There's all kinds of different fish running in this river. And I would walk up and down the river and fish and meet other fishermen along the way. And this one particular day kind of changed everything with this normal routine that I pretty much started this early spring in 2012. So one day, normal day, I wake up, pack up my fishing gear around 8 o'clock in the morning. I walk down to the same river that I've been fishing this whole entire time. I get down there. There's no cars, no people, just me fishing all by myself. I'm like, wow, this is peaceful. You hear all the birds chirping and you hear the water flowing, and it's super nice and peaceful. And you're like, this is like really, really nice. I was calm. I wasn't scared or anything. I was just doing my thing, fishing, having a good time because I love fishing. It's one of my favorite hobbies to do. So I'm walking down to this river, and I had to cross this barbed wire fence that the DNR in Michigan laid over a piece of plywood over the fence because the property owner put the barbed wire fence all the way up to the river. And he wasn't allowed to do that, so the DNR pretty much ripped his fence down. But they left the fence, they just kind of put plywood over it. I was stepping over the plywood to get across the fence to the other side. And I was making my way down to this spot known as the honey hole by the other fishermen that have fished there and told me about this spot. So I was taking advantage of me being by myself to go fish the spot. I probably get maybe a couple hours into fishing. There's a bunch of steelhead in this hole, and I'm trying to fish for them and catch them, but they're not biting. But I'm trying my hardest to, just fish. And it's super peaceful. All of a sudden, I hear this very loud splash sound, like maybe 50 feet down from where I was fishing. And this wasn't like a normal splash. This wasn't the sound of a fish jumping out of the water and splashing in the water. This was like very strong force threw down into the water, big splash, kadunk sound. And I paused for a second. I looked and I see the splash. I'm like, what was that? I'm like frozen. Like I'm trying to figure out what this splash sound is. And right after that happened, this giant 9-foot tall black haired creature leans out over the water, looks in the water where the big splash happened, turned its head, looked right at me. And I frozen fear. I'm like, what is that? I had no idea what I was looking at the time. Like I just saw this giant, super tall, black haired creature lean out over the water, looked right at me. We both made eye contact. His mouth opened like he got surprised. His mouth opened. My mouth was gaped wide open. I'm like, like, what is this? And I made no sound. I was completely frozen in fear. I was shaking. I didn't know what to do. I had my fishing pole in my hand still, though my line was still in the water. I didn't even reel it in. And then this thing, we probably made eye contact for maybe 30 seconds, but it felt so much longer than 30 seconds. He then turned his head inward and leaned back out of the view that I could see him because the brush was so thick by the river. He leaned in. I couldn't see him anymore, but all I could hear is the sticks and branches cracking under his feet when he walked. It was just like, like super thick, super heavy footfall. It sounded like he was really heavy when he was walking. So I heard him fading into the woods, and I lost sight. I lost sound. I couldn't hear anything anymore. And then I started reeling my line in, and I started packing up. And then I noticed something. All of the birds in the area were gone. It was just complete silence. All I could hear was the water flowing. And I was like, this is the weirdest thing. What is going on? So I pack all my gear up. I start calling into the woods because I'm like, hello, is anybody there? Hello. I'm getting no response. And then I start getting my gear up even faster. I'm starting to pack all my stuff back in my tackle box. And then I hear like this really loud boom sound, like just crack, super loud. Like it's super loud. What I later found out was called a knock sound. 3 knocks, boom, boom, boom. And I was like, what is that? Because it sounded like when I was 16 and I was a teenager, this sounded like a gun going on, like someone shooting a gun at first. But then it sounded like it's making more of like a wood sound. Like someone took a baseball bat and hit a tree, basically. So this sound echoed into the woods, and I heard it for a while, and then I'm like, what is that sound? So then I start making my way back towards the trail. I kept getting goosebumps. I kept getting the feeling that I was being watched this whole entire time I was walking back to the road. I kept turning around, looking behind me. Nothing was there. I kept getting this like weird feeling deep down, like I was being followed or someone was watching me. I did not feel comfortable at all. I felt super uncomfortable. I didn't feel any threat towards me from this thing, but the thing that intimidated me the most was the sheer size of this thing, because this thing probably could have picked me up and just carried me away easily. That's how big it was. So I get back to walking down the trail, and I come to that barbed wire fence that I was telling you guys about earlier. I step over the plywood. I maybe get like 10 feet in front of down past the barbed wire fence, and I hear this loud like crash sound that sounded like metal on metal, like rubbing, and loud snap sound. Turn around, and this creature jumped over the barbed wire fence and just took off up the hill away from me. Like he was running away from me. He was crashing through the brush, crashing through the branches. He was transitioning from all fours to upright, down to all fours, upright, and he was just weaving in and out of the trees. And I'm like, what is going on? And I chased up after it, trying to get a better view. And I couldn't run as fast as this thing. This thing was just super fast running. And when I got over this hill, it was gone. I couldn't see it anymore. And I was like, whew, I better get out of here. So I ran back to the trail, grabbed my gear, still making my way down the trail towards the road. And I run into my aunt, my brother, and my cousin. And they were walking towards the direction where I was fishing. And I said, guys, you need to turn around and go back the other way right now. And they're like, why? What's going on? And I said, I think I had a Bigfoot sighting. I'm not really sure what I saw, but I think it was a Bigfoot. And my aunt was like, oh my God, that's crazy. And then she said that about half an hour prior to them walking down the trail towards me, they were up walking around this pond, and they heard a growl sound, like a really deep growl. And then they heard heavy footfalls walking in my direction. And then about 45 minutes later, that's when I had my sighting and ran into them. So they believe that they heard the Bigfoot that I saw. And when the Bigfoot initially leaned out over the river and looked in the water, he was only about 50 feet down from me. So I could see this thing clear as day. I could see the color of its fur. I could see how big his shoulders were. I could see the shape of his head. The shape of his head was very similar to what I know is the shape of a gorilla's head, how it kind of has a cone shaped. So that's the shape of the head. He had bare cheeks. He had brown skin, brown eyes. He had canine teeth, sharp canine teeth, kind of like a gorilla's teeth. Because I noticed that when he opened his mouth, all I saw was his white canines, because he was like scared, Like, I don't know if he was scared or not, but he was surprised that I was there because he was there too at the same time. So we pretty much were both surprised at the same time. His skin was like oily, it was shiny. Like I saw the sunlight glistening off his skin on his cheeks. And then I only saw his upper torso because his legs were still in the heavy brush by the water. But he was tall enough to lean out over the water, and I could see his super broad shoulders. You can see the muscles through his fur. That's how muscular he was. That's why I said I felt like this thing could just pick me up and carry me away. That's how muscular this thing looked. And the intimidation from the sheer size of this thing. I was pretty much the same height when I was 16 as I am now, about 6'2". This thing had to at least be 8.5, 9 feet tall. And I was completely frozen in fear. After the fact, like I met up with my aunt, my brother, my cousin, I felt better that they were with me. I felt more safe, more comfortable, so to speak. And it took me about 8 years to come back to that same exact spot. So last year, a local Bigfooter in my area, he reached out to me. He saw my sighting. If you guys go to the BFRO.net and you click on the United States map, and then you click on Michigan, and then you click on Iosco County, you can see all of the sightings that have happened in my county. And if you scroll down and you see Class A sighting by a young man fishing near Whittemore, that's me. This man reaches out to me and he goes, I read your sighting. I want to learn more. Can we meet up? And I said, yeah, let's do it. So I met up with him and we went to the same exact location that I had my Bigfoot sighting. We met at a picnic table area, and then we just kind of hiked down the fishing trail that I took when I was 16 years old. I'm 28 now. We got down to the trail and we hit the same barbed wire fence was still there that was there when I was 16, and it's been a lot more groomed since then. Like there's a lot more human interference with that land. There's like green grass that's been cut in this one section by a campground now, and so the scenery changed slightly from when I was there last. And we get to the honey hole, and I'm explaining to him I was standing right here fishing, and right over there is where I had my sighting. That Bigfoot stepped out over the water right there, and he goes, "Holy crap! I got chills." And I was like, "Yeah, I got chills too when it happened." So he was very intrigued by my sighting, and that was the last time that I went to that spot was last year. So I haven't been to that spot ever since. I was helping out at the local Rotary a few weeks ago, and my wife and I were volunteering to do face paintings and face tattoos for this family fun fair we were having in our town. This lady that works at the Chamber of Commerce in my town, she came up to me and she goes, "Hey, I heard about your sighting. We're actually having a Bigfoot bash in June 3rd this year." And she was like, "I would be honored if you came. We're going to have a couple guest speakers up on stage. You can come attend in the audience, and I'll get you a seat right up front in the front row. And in the Q&A session at the end, we'd like to hear your sighting." And I was like, "Sure, I'll go." And she bought me a ticket, and I'm waiting for that event to happen. So that was the Bigfoot pre-bash. The Bigfoot bash, we're going to have another conference in our town September 30th of this year. Oscoda, Michigan is hosting Matt Moneymaker, Cliff Brackman, and Jeff Meldrum, all Bigfoot gurus. Matt Moneymaker and Cliff are from the show Finding Bigfoot on Animal Planet, and Matt Moneymaker is the founder of the BFRO organization, and Jeff Meldrum, he's a professor at some kind of university out west, but he has a lot of Bigfoot samples. Like he has like casted footprints, and he does a lot of research on Bigfoot. So he's going to be there, and he's going to be telling his stuff and answering questions from people. And she's like, I highly suggest you come to this. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So hopefully someday I get to meet Matt Moneymaker. I've always wanted to meet that guy ever since I had my Bigfoot sighting, which was my only sighting. That's the only time I've ever had a Bigfoot sighting. I've been obsessed with Bigfoot and doing research on Bigfoot, seeing other people's sightings. And when I listen to other podcasts and listen to other people's experiences, I still get the chills because some of the stuff that these people describe, I saw that too. I'm with that person. I've been there. I know what they went through. I know how they feel because I felt the same way.